content of this channel is for mature audiences. Parental discretion is advised. You're tuned in to the Green Gorilla channel. Please make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell notification button. And please, feel free to share the video. Thank you. Yo, what's good, everybody? I'm Gigi, man. You tuned in to the Green Gorilla channel. It's the place where black men can express themselves freely, straight up, with no chases. Yeah, I said it. First things first, man. Big up to all you haters out there, man. I hope y'all having a good afternoon. And when you come in, man, can you please hit the like button, the subscribe button, and the bell notification button so you can stay on top of what's going on here on the Green Gorilla channel. And you know, man, it's important for y'all, if you like the content, man, if you like the videos, if you hate the videos, whatever it is, man, subscribe to the channel. So you can be a sideline hater, if that's what you're into, or whatever it is you're into. Subscribe to the channel so you can love to hate the Green Gorilla. And if you like the content, man, subscribe to the channel. You know, we already got problems with the algorithm, man, you know, off T-tops, because, you know, we're black male content creators to say pretty controversial things. So, you know, any support that you give would be greatly appreciated, even if it comes in the form of just a like or a basic subscription, man. But anyway, man, I want to give a shout out to all the people who support me, who actually do. Shout out to Ezekiel Will. Thank you, sir. Shout out to Naomi Gary, J. Cleveland Green, Mr. H, Brotherly Love 215, Pulpit 28, Lee Ways, No Sleep, Broken Blade, and Mr. King, excuse me. Big up to y'all. Big up to Black Men Being Brutally Honest, Larry R, Seth Sun, Devon Love Ridge, Afro Truth TV, Show Me, Spain Man, Ben Cannon Kenton, Seven Coast Dojo, Apex Prowler, and Anthony Davis. Big up. Big up to I'm Just Jules, Black's Word 404, and Honest Look, Sherlyn Woe, Ricky Dawson, Stefan, Julius Ferguson, Lord Hamal, True 7360, and Call for President. Big up. Big up to Mr. Me Too, Superman's Cape, Gold Professor, AKs and Curtains, H-Town, Rogish the Billmonger, Adrian Thomas, Electrician 480, Binga, Cutting Up with the Jones, and Zanco 1. Big up. Big up to D. Scott, Path God 74, Pete Rock 496, Aaron Peters, Barnolis, Dardar, Vincent Lindsay, Beautiful Trauma, Quiz the Poet, Black Wizard, ADOS, and Jazz Tech. Big up. Big up the Shadow Observer, Sugar T, Artisan MC, Troy Warren, Mrs. KP Bailey, Alan Wiley, The Face, Life of Commerce, Dreamlit, A. Wilson's Ghost, and Timothy Blewett. Big up. Big up to Jeffrey Speed, Marvin Battle Jr., Adam, BGS Ivmore, Ignatz Mouse, Brian Peaks, Papa Dida, Scott Haywood, Black Uru, and Dr. Tree 33. Big up. Big up to Leroy Honeycutt, 77 Base X, Brian McMurray, Karen S., Charles Rogers, Rick Ross, Sandra Jean, Charles Gilmore, Greg Berry Little, and Mr. Valentino. Big up. Big up to Cameron 87, Dr. Rock, Mark Swift, Odd Collar, Donald Watts, Coach Hotep, Old Soul Chief, Mr. Blue Collar, TD Hip Hop Media, Drew Main, and Mr. Heat. Big up. Big up to Sir Anthony, MLR, Universal 178, Rashid Barnes, Aaron Smith, DH, Red Pill Revelator, Aaron Infinite, Dr. Tiasan Johnson, Kalan Chakala, Hostile Adept, and WPR1. And I can't forget the brothers who've reached the ethereal plane, Force Windu, David Carroll, and Kevin Samuels. Big up to all of them, man. And, on my Patreon side, I want to give a shout out to Chris Flowers, Christopher Burton, Daxby, J Live, Rashawn Phillips Sorrells, Keith Bass, Nick, Albert C., Dr. Ben Vincent, J. Cleveland Green, I'm the Light of My Father, Waffle Weave, Tyrone Hampton, Darnell Smith, Excalibur, Anu 219, Pursuer Prisoner, Taz, Dragon 59, Jay Bailey, Mr. Michi Momal, and Asangwa. Big up to those gentlemen and those brethren. Y'all deserve a round of applause. Thank you so much for supporting the Green Gorilla channel on an ongoing basis. And if you want to support the channel, and it's really helpful, man, when you support the channel. If you feel like you want to, man, because you enjoy the content, here's how you do it, and I'll be back. What's good, everybody? I'm the G with a PhD, and you're tuned in to the Green Gorilla channel, the place where black men can express themselves freely, straight up, no chaser. Today, I want to introduce you to my new membership program that consists of 5 levels where you can invest in the Green Gorilla channel on a monthly basis and receive level-specific perks. Memberships are special because they improve the quality of the content of the channel and will help me to be able to keep the channel going. Now, to participate in the Green Gorilla channel membership program, all you have to do is hit the join button, which is located right next to the subscribe button on my channel page. Now, for all of my subscribers who decide not to participate in my membership program, nothing will change. The content will keep coming the way it always has. Thanks for watching, and be careful out here, people. Bless. Yeah, I'm GG, man. You tuned in to the Green Gorilla channel. It's the place, again, where black men can express themselves freely, straight up with no chasers, man. You got to be careful expressing yourself freely nowadays, man. It can lead to a whole bunch of adverse reactions from various persons, man, who are hell-bent on seeing you destroyed. They want to ruin you and shit. Like, oh, right, that's what you want to do? They want to try to give you the Jakars treatment, to burn your ass. That's what they want to do. They want to destroy you and shit. I don't believe in destroying anybody, man, unless you're trying to destroy me. But I mean, like, if you got a difference of opinion, man, that's just your opinion, man. But just be respectful in how you express it. That's all I can ask for, especially if you're in here. And for all the people out there, man, if you got a wrench and you're in the chat, man, like, watch the chat, man, and get rid of these fools, man. I feel like, the Wicked Witch of the West in the Wiz and shit. I don't want no bad news, man. I don't want no bad news. Don't nobody bring me no bad news, man. I don't want to hear none of that bullshit. Now, if you want to have a conversation outside of the chat, you want to actually be invited and come on in because you got something you got to say, well, then just come on in. I'm inviting you. But don't sit and say passive-aggressive, a little snarky, a little snide, a little punk, bitch-made ass shit in the chat. Don't do it, man. Knock them dudes out the box, man. Send them back to their maker, man. Get them out of here, man. I'm shutting the door on these niggas, man. Get the fuck up on out of here. I'm throwing them out the house like Jazzy Jeff, man. Get the hell up out of here, man. Ain't no need to deal with that disrespect, man. Shout out to Rashad McKinney. Just hit me up on the Cash App. Shout out to him, man. So, before I even say anything, there's something that I want to address. I know it's going to be offensive, and, it just is what it is, man. I just have to be offensive, man. I have to be. And, I just want to ask a simple and a basic question, especially for women out there. If you're a woman out there and you're listening, I want you to just consider the following questions that I have to ask. And I know it's going to be upsetting. It's going to be, something that you might be triggered by. I'm going to tell you right now, it's probably going to trigger you. Okay? So I'm telling you from the beginning. you're gonna get triggered. But my question is basically, like, do women have a choice? Do y'all have choices? So, do girls near or at puberty, do they receive sex education in school that lets them know or that informs them on the consequences of sexual activity? Huh? I mean, from like the onset of puberty, are they not educated in this domain of information, or are they not exposed to this? Also, do girls, whether they be teenagers, whether they be grown women, females, whatever, human women, do they have a choice as to whether or not they will have premarital sex? Do you have a choice as to whether or not you're going to have premarital sex? Do women have a choice as to whether or not they will get pregnant by a man? Do you have a choice? Do women and girls, whether they be teenagers or in their 20s, 30s, 40s, however long you can get pregnant, do women have access to birth control, like the Norplant, the pill, and have access to spermicide and diaphragms? Do they? I'm just asking the question. Are not women the final decision makers and the arbiters and safekeepers of sex and reproduction? Are they not the final arbiters and safekeepers of sex and reproduction? And then my further question is, if the answer to each of these questions is yes, 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 and yes, then why do we constantly hear women talking about deadbeat daddies and shit? Huh? Why? Why? I wonder. Why? I wonder, man. I'm wondering, like, why? Shout out to Dub Will. He says, salute, Gigi. Thanks for your breakdown on the stay-at-home wife bullshit. I thought I was the only one who thought that was ridiculous, but I'm glad to see some brothers still got some sense. Yes, indeed. Shout out to that brother right there, man. You deserve a bomb for that. But my questions are, again, don't y'all got sex education so you know what happens when you put this in that? Do you have a choice as to whether or not you're going to have sex before you're married? Do you have a choice as to whether or not you will get pregnant if you decide to have sex before you get married? Don't you know what the birth control pill is, Norplant, and diaphragms are, and spermicide are, and condoms are? Don't you know that you're the final arbiters and the safekeepers of sex and reproduction? If you know that the answer to each of those questions is yes, then why are we constantly hearing women, why are we constantly hearing them talking about deadbeat daddies and shit? Why? Quite frankly, I'm tired of hearing motherfuckers talk about this shit and complain about deadbeat daddies and shit. I'm tired of hearing that. Because as far as I'm concerned, I'm just keeping it a buck. Yeah, it takes two to tango. But if it's the case that you are the final decision maker and the arbiter and the safekeeper of sex and reproduction, then you know what the fucking consequences are, then maybe perhaps you shouldn't be throwing that ass in a circle or backing that ass up before you have a lifetime commitment with a guy who's dedicated to taking care of you and your kids. But you already know that shit. But you already know that. You already know it. It's like telling a motherfucker, look, don't stare at the sun. Because if you stare at it too long, you're going to go blind. But because you're curious and you want to demonstrate that you can handle it, you go out and do it. And you know it's some dumbass shit, but you just go ahead and do it. You look directly in the sun. And then after you do it, you don't blame yourself for the shit if you go blind. You blame everybody but your goddamn self. They blame the motherfucker that told them don't look at the sun. They blame the sun itself for being too bright. They blame their eyes for not having the capacity to take in the sun's rays without being damaged. They do everything but turn inward and take responsibility for the shit themselves. Now, no one is forcing slutty, thottish, and slovenly behavior. Nobody's forcing slutty, thottish, and slovenly behavior. Nobody's forcing women to be out here fucking. Nobody's making you fuck except for, rapists, which is a very small portion of the population. Let's just be frank about this shit. No one is forcing women to have premarital sex. They out there throwing that ass in the circle, backing that ass up, letting everybody know, I want that, ooh, ooh, ooh. Nobody's forcing this. But what people are doing is they're reinforcing people's right to engage in this behavior, male and female. It's okay to be slutty, thottish, and slovenly and to blame everyone else and everything except for women at all. Can't blame them for none of this shit. And my suspicion is that people do this because they infantilize, and enable women incessantly. Can't hold them accountable because you put your penis in that woman and you should know what the consequences are, and which is true. This is a fact. So I'm just saying, but it takes two to tango, and ultimately, it's the woman who bears the greatest consequences. Do they not? Maybe I'm missing some shit. Maybe I don't got it all together. Maybe I'm devoid of understanding here. You're the one that has to carry the fucking kid for 9 months. You would think that before you get out there and you start throwing that ass in the circle and backing that ass up, you know what the consequences are and act more carefully. But hey, I'm just tired of hearing that trope. I'm tired of hearing that, man. You got a society of women who know what happens when you put the outie in the innie and you go back and forth with the horizontal mumbo jumbo. You know what it is. But see, we put the cart before the horse. We think that a pound of cure is better than an ounce of prevention. But then that leads us into the subject matter of today, which is basically we're talking about ghetto shit. And ultimately what we're doing, again, is I'm reading a book, man, called Dark Ghettos, Injustice, Dissent, and Reform. And I'm going through it. Everybody has something to say about ghetto people, ghetto culture, and all of this. We're getting into the nitty-gritty about it. What to do about the ghetto culture? What to do about the ghetto conditions? What do we do about it? Everybody has something to say about it. Everybody got something to say about Strags and Pookie and Ray Ray and all of this shit. What are some viable solutions or alternatives to ghetto culture? Or how do we perceive the black community in relation to this problem of the ghetto? What do we do? I hear a lot of people talking, but not in a linear fashion. Everybody here is a fucking logician. They're so rational, and they're equipped with such powers of ratiocination. But I mean, it's just a whole bunch of opinion being spewed back and forth. Nothing systematic, no systematic treatment of this issue based upon contemporary research. So I said, you know what? Let's have a protracted discussion about ghetto shit from a philosophical point of view. So that's what we're gonna do. Again, the name of the book is Dark Ghettos. I've been going over it. I'm not gonna get into all the intricacies of where I left off at. Man, this is the 9th video in this series, man. The 9th. So you can go back and watch those videos in order to get up to pace what's going on here. But what we did was we covered the intro to the text. We talked about, community. And in that chapter, there was a suggestion that, the way you clean up the ghettos is through integration. That's how you do it. You integrate. Now, of course, the author has some objections to this. He says, well, the duty, everybody has a duty towards justice, but the duty to integrate is unreasonably high for black people precisely because, they're the ones that have to pack up their shit and move around white people's neighborhoods or have white people intervene into their habitats and their neighborhoods, just come in and reshape and re-terraform their areas. Why should black people have to take on this burden? Why shouldn't the people who are responsible for the injustice in the first place not bear the largest burden in relation to integration? That's the argument he makes. Shout out to Clarence Everett. He says a little something for the lesson, Professor G. Appreciate you, dog. You deserve a bomb. Appreciate that. But anyway, I'm about to share the screen. Let me share this doggone thing. Let me make the screen full. So anyway, I'm not, again, as I said, I got a glossary of notes. I've been over many of these terms before, okay? But what I do want to do is go over what I've already covered in chapter 3, which is where we are, so you can understand, and then eventually I'll probably go over chapter 2 and the entire text at some point. I might do a little reassessment or a revamping of everything, putting it all together, like a review session or something like that. But anyway, this chapter 3 is on culture. Okay? And everybody knows, so he starts off the chapter by saying that there's a hypothesis, and it's called the culture of poverty. We've all heard it before in one shape, form, or fashion or another. Because you got black urban poor who've been segregated apart from mainstream society, and they've lived for so long under miserable conditions, many have come to adopt attitudes, practices, and self-concepts that prevent them from being able to improve their life prospects. Now, it could be because of the social distance. It could be because of their spatial isolation from mainstream institutions. Whatever it is, these cultural traits are spread across friends and family or peers and across generations. And it's an ongoing cycle with catastrophic consequences, no end in sight. So that's how the argument goes. Yes, Paul Wilson, that would be called gentrification. But, you know, of course, he's saying that integration, he doesn't oppose integration, but he says that black folks should have a choice. Because they're the ones who are being subjected to injustice. And if they are the ones who are being subjected to injustice the most, related to ghettoization and the way that the ghettos were formed in the first place, why should they be the ones to bear the largest burden for dismantling the ghettos? That's his argument. So anyway, he mentioned something called new cultural analysts, which are a group of people, a group of social scientists who study urban poverty. They're the new cultural analysts. And they offer, I guess, what they consider to be cultural analysis of the urban poor. And according to the author, he says, they leave open the question. They don't really solve it, in an absolute fashion. They leave the question open as to who is ultimately responsible for the disadvantages that the ghetto poor face. And even when they make claims about personal responsibility, they don't leave out government responsibility in terms of improving the prospects of the black urban poor. So the government is not left off the hook. And among these new cultural analysts, not very many of them believe that the cultural traits of the ghetto poor are the primary causes of the persistence of ghettos, or that the traits of the ghetto poor are independent of structural or systemic features and factors. Also, the new cultural analysts, they don't use the language that, like, say, for example, Kenneth Clark used to use, or many social scientists used to use, basically, the language of pathology, dysfunction, and so on and so forth, when they describe the cultural traits of the poor. Why? Because that would be perceived as racist. Let's face it. It would be perceived as racist, okay? Even though most social scientists who do this don't use this language, and they leave open-ended questions about who's primarily responsible and so on and so forth, there are many among them who argue that there's something called the cultural divergence thesis, or who advocate or promote this idea of the cultural divergence thesis. And this theory is that a large segment of the ghetto poor, they diverge culturally from mainstream values and norms, and this prevents them from being upwardly mobile. So that's the cultural divergence thesis. You got a large amount of ghetto poor who don't have mainstream values, and this is preventing them from being upwardly mobile or preventing them from being able to escape poverty. Now, there's an assumption that Shelby makes at this point. He says, for the sake of argument, I'm going to assume that in some form or another, that the cultural divergence thesis is true. I think, he's just going to say, let's, for the sake of argument, assume that it is true. But he says, even if it is true, he wants to explore what is morally acceptable or what's just or unjust in terms of cultural reform. Because there are a lot of people who have suggestions about cultural reform. Well, we need to do this. We need to do that. We need to say, fuck these niggas. We need to say, fuck these bitches. We need to put more niggas in jail. We need to separate ourselves from these niggas and so on and so forth, or whatever the case may be. Got a lot of suggestions. But are the suggestions in line with justice? Are they morally permissible? Are they morally acceptable? Because according to Shelby, he's going to say, look, there are reform efforts that can't be justified to the ghetto poor. Especially if you're going to bring in the government in order to try to reform people. That's a hell of a stretch to make right there. So you're going to get the government in order to reform the bad behavior of any group of people? Like, is that the role of government? Is that something that the government should be engaged in? So exactly what is cultural reform? Basically, it is a call to intervene into the lives of ghetto poor people in order to shift their culture away from suboptimal traits so that they will get out of poverty and the concentrated disadvantage that they find themselves in. That's the goal, okay? So, there's something called the weak cultural divergence theorists, okay? So, that, or just say it's, you got two forms of cultural divergence theorists. There's some that are like have a weak view. There's others that have a strong view. Among the people that have the weak view, they say, well, you know, the ghetto poor, they develop ghetto-specific cultural traits, but if conditions or the environment change, they would give up those traits. So in other words, if they had real opportunity to succeed in mainstream society, they would drop the cultural traits that are suboptimal and fall in line with, you know, what's appropriate or what mainstream values are in the society in which they live. So basically, these weak cultural divergence theorists basically say that, you know, the ghetto culture is nothing more than an adaptation to a lack of opportunity. And if that's the case, some say that, you know, well, maybe perhaps intervention in such an instance is a good thing. If we can, you know, teach the urban poor better habits, that's a good thing. Because people can develop habits and not be aware that they have bad habits. Okay? And if we're going to purge people of these bad habits or practices, it might have to be forced. Okay? But then you have, on the other hand, strong cultural divergence theorists. And I've heard black people talk like this as well, like the strong cultural divergence theorists. They basically say, look, ghetto culture may have started off, or divergent cultural patterns may have begun as a strategy for survival, but many of the ghetto poor have come to accept these traits as part of their social identity. And the characteristics in question have become self-perpetuating. And in the absence of intervention, they will likely remain even if you have educational and employment opportunities improve. Even if you get you give niggas reparations today, they still gonna be niggas with reparations. They gonna fuck up a check. Even if you got better anti-discrimination laws, they still gonna be fucked up because of the cultural traits that they've taken up as part of their social identity. And then you ask the question, well, what are these bad cultural traits? And this is the shit that fucks me up right here. Bad cultural traits. What are they? The lack of conventional occupation ambition, or the rejection of the American work ethic. The rejection of the American work ethic. What you doing? Nothing. This is where you get your didn't do nothing ideologies and shit like that. Number 2, hostility or skepticism towards formal education. I don't want to learn that shit. What I want to learn that for? That ain't gonna do nothing for me. Learning the white man's education and shit. I don't want to know that. Number 3, the devaluation of traditional co-parenting within a nuclear family. Uh-oh. Thought culture. Thought culture. Distrust of established authority, particularly officials of the criminal justice system, but also members of the clergy and educators. And I'm guilty of this, the use of vulgar language and street vernacular. Words like niggas, bitches, hoes, cars, clothes. I suppose I just want to be successful. God. Number 6, a hedonistic orientation towards intense and immediate, feel-goodisms, pleasure. Pursuing frequent casual sex, gambling, drinking, fighting, recreational drug use, and so on, connected to a refusal to delay such gratification and a high tolerance for risk. And lastly, he says, many, especially black boys and young men. Now, I don't know, I really don't know why at this point he does not introduce women into the fold, but, as per the course, he does eventually say something about women, but at this juncture, he does not. Many, especially black boys and young men, are thought to regard promiscuity and sexual infidelity as morally acceptable. And they attach little or no stigma to teenage pregnancy, non-marital childbearing, paternal desertion. There we go. I already said what I had to say about it, though. We'll come back to it. Paternal desertion or single mother households. Some are believed to be highly invested in regularly experiencing long stretches of idleness with no planned or organized activities. What you doing? I'm chilling. What's up, Dirty? What's cracking with you, man? Oh, man, ain't shit going on, dog. I'm just chilling. You chilling? Man, I'm chilling. You feel me? I'm chilling like a motherfucker, you know what I'm saying? Sipping on this scissor, drinking on this drizzle, smoking on this blizzard, chilling, man. Feel me? Many are said to be oriented towards crude materialism and a preoccupation with clothing style, often seeking personal prestige through the conspicuous consumption of luxury items and high-status brands. Street crime and interpersonal aggression are tolerated and sometimes embraced, including a readiness to use deception, manipulation, and even violence to achieve one's aim. Smoking on that Zaza. Got that them Zazas, them Zaza packs. Then he talks about ghetto identity and what it entails. We can regard a person's ghetto-oriented and suboptimal beliefs, values, and practices as constituting a ghetto identity if A, They figure prominently in the person's positive self-concept. B, they are relatively stable across different social contexts. In other words, there's little or no code switching or frame switching. Nigga, I'm a G. I'm always a G. You feel me? I ain't changed. I never change. I never, ever change. I never change. I'm still stuck in my ways. I never change. I'm still dealing with crime because crime pays. I never changed. Then 10 years later, now I'm all grown up. I used to wear the bright watch, now I got the right watch. So anyway, if the ghettos prominently fixed in your head and you develop a positive self-concept related to it, if you maintain this identity across different contexts, and if you are resistant to changing your identity as a matter of principle, you can be said to have a ghetto identity. So, he says, I don't know why I got this dust there. Get rid of that shit. He says, on the strong view, and I know he's referring to strong cultural divergence theory. He says, on the strong view, even given a chance to attend or to send their children to a good school, to obtain a well-paid, non-menial job, or to move into a low-poverty neighborhood, many ghetto residents would still cling to their ghetto identities. What's the song like with the Biggie Small said, man, a long time ago? He said something about I'm a piece of shit and ain't hard to tell. When I die, I'ma probably go to hell. Cause I'm a piece of shit, it ain't hard to tell. I don't wanna go to heaven, fuck that shit with all the goody goodies. No, I wanna smoke blunts and roll dice. Fuck, I don't want to be good. I want to sleep all day. I want to roll blunts and roll. I want to smoke blunts and roll dice. So on the strong view, say even given a chance, many ghetto residents are going to cling to their ghetto identities. Then he makes a point. He says, the most sophisticated proponents, and I say Hasididi niggas, it's just a joke for myself. But anyway, he says, sophisticated proponents of the cultural divergence thesis are careful not to conflate ghetto identity with black identity. Because insofar as ghetto identity is regarded as black, it should be thought of as a mode of blackness and not blackness itself. Because many people who are black reject categorically ghetto identity. They want to distance themselves as much as they possibly can from ghetto identity. Okay? And this is where I left off. So all of this thus far has been catching you up. Now I'm going to read a little chunk of the text. And the question is, well, okay, now that we know, now that we are aware of the various ideas related to cultural divergence and what people have to say about it, what the fuck do we do? How do we engage in cultural reform? Now, I'm not going to read a whole lot of this. I'm going to read maybe for about 20, 30 minutes, and then I'm chilling. I've been reading as much as I wanted to read, in terms of catching this up, but I'll read a good chunk of this shit, and then I'm about to, I'll go to moral reform. I'll get to moral reform. I might push through more, predicated on how I feel when I get through with the moral reform. But anyway, he says, when confronted with compelling evidence to support the cultural divergence hypothesis, some might acknowledge that cultural change in ghetto neighborhoods is needed, but are averse, want to recoil from the idea that government should play an active role in bringing about such changes, apart from making necessary changes to those aspects of the basic structure that negatively affect the lives of the urban poor. But he says, and this is his own words now, this is his opinion, the approach I examine would be less hesitant to get the government involved in effecting cultural changes in the lives of the ghetto poor. So he's open to the idea of government intervention to impact cultural changes in the lives of the ghetto poor. He says, indeed, it might be thought that such state intervention is essential if ghetto poverty and its associated ills are to actually be adequately addressed. But he says, cultural reform has to be distinguished from mere behavior modification. I'm going to highlight that. That's important. So cultural reform should be set apart from, marked off from mere behavior modification. He says the state might try to change the behavior of the ghetto poor without attempting to change their cultural configurations. Regarding any cultural changes that do occur as unintended byproducts of intended behavioral changes. And he gives an example in order for you to understand what he means. For instance, the state might use incentives or penalties to induce behavior thought to be more conducive to upward mobility. If non-marital childbearing or refusing to work is believed to contribute to poverty, then the government might step in to penalize such behavior with the hope that poor people will choose work and get married if they want to have children. He says, see part 2 for a discussion of such policies. And we will get there. He does talk about reproduction and justice and injustice in relation to it. He does have a protracted conversation about that. He says this would be behavior modification, not cultural reform. With behavior modification, there need not be a presumption that the undesirable behavior is part of a learned cultural pattern or social identity. So that's important. The behavior may simply be the result of individual, rational, or irrational decision-making or habit, not necessarily some sort of cultural, defect or so, or of some sort. It says, if there is a discernible pattern of such behavior in a group, this may simply reflect similar decision-making or common errors in practical reasoning among those in the group. But then he goes on to say, by contrast, cultural reform is premised on the assumption that the relevant behavioral changes will only occur or are more likely to occur or will be more durable if some cultural patterns in poor black communities are modified. That's important. He goes on to say, here there is a presumption that the suboptimal behavior in question is shaped or influenced by a set of cultural configurations. Thus, the cultural reformer would harness the power and resources of the state, perhaps in conjunction with private firms and nonprofit organizations, to bring about the desired cultural changes. That's Then he goes on to say there are at least 3 types of cultural changes that might be sought, and each type has different normative implications. So 3 types of cultural changes with 3 different types of normative, implications. He said the first and the least radical will be cultural augmentation. Here you can just see adding values or adding different, cultural norms. Here the cultural reformer seeks to add to the cultural repertoire of the ghetto poor without attempting to remove or alter any of their existing cultural traits. So that's the first type, right? The idea would be to equip blacks with some mainstream cultural tools, sometimes called cultural capital, which they could then choose and when and whether to use and to what ends. So you're adding to the toolkit, not taking anything out of the kit. Their prior cultural attachments, whatever they happen to be, would not then be threatened. So that's one approach. He says the second and more radical change is cultural removal. That's important. This would involve eliminating or neutralizing any existing cultural traits believed to be suboptimal. In other words, we're going to get rid of them. Anything we find is suboptimal, we're wiping it clean. But he says, this type of intervention does not involve instilling new or mainstream cultural traits. Cultural removal would work best if, as some cultural analysts insist, most among the ghetto poor already embrace mainstream cultural values and norms. Simply removing or diffusing any suboptimal traits might then be sufficient to put them on a path out of ghetto poverty, in essence, right? He says the most radical approach to cultural reform would be cultural rehabilitation, which is a combination of cultural augmentation and cultural removal. Combines cultural augmentation with cultural removal. Getting rid of existing suboptimal traits and replacing them with mainstream cultural traits. And see, I hear motherfuckers talking about Pookie and Ray Ray and a whole bunch of shit, but I don't hear a sophisticated conversation about how to actually engage in cultural reform. So you've already been presented with 3 models. One is cultural augmentation, the other is cultural removal, the other is cultural rehabilitation, which combines augmentation and removal. But then he says, which types of cultural traits are going to be targets for cultural reform? The particular traits identified for augmentation or removal will affect how controversial and potentially problematic the mode of cultural reform would be. Attempts to change shared beliefs among the ghetto poor would be the least controversial, provided the beliefs in question pertain to matters of fact. Now, this is some shit that I've not heard here in this space. So if you got a group of ghetto poor who share beliefs, reforming those probably would be the least controversial if it's the case that the beliefs in question are pertaining to matters of fact rather than to desiderata, what's desirable or valuable, and provided that the beliefs are not religious convictions. So let's say, for example, the ghetto poor have a belief system that, you know, the earth is flat or some shit like that, and then you come along and say, well, we got to change those beliefs. The belief system that you have is just not true. That's not controversial, he would say, to come along and try to change that. He says, for example, if some, and he gives his own example though, if some among the poor share the belief that formal education will not improve their life prospects, or that there are no decent jobs available to them, and if this belief is incorrect factually, then a cultural reformer might try to change this erroneous perception or to prevent its spread. The cultural reformer might also attempt to change the skill set of those targeted for reform. Some cultural analysts maintain that the cultural repertoire of poor blacks includes social skills for operating in ghettos. But these ghetto-specific skills may not be helpful in the wider world, and deployed in a mainstream context may hurt one's chances of success. So in other words, ghetto-specific skills are not transferable to mainstream society, although there are many who beg to differ. I'm not going there. Anyway, he says, effectively navigating the mainstream social world so as to improve one's socio-economic situation also involves the deft deployment of cultural skills. Insofar as the ghetto poor lack these skills, the cultural reformer might seek to impart them. This type of cultural augmentation is unobjectionable, at least in principle. Once these skills are acquired, the agents can decide whether to make use of this practical know-how and for what purposes. And they can continue to rely on their ghetto-specific know-how if they so choose. So, like adding to. So, cultural augmentation, he says, is of this kind is, you know, not very objectionable, okay? But he says de-skilling is another matter. A person can lose an acquired skill if he or she does not use it enough. Either the ability degrades over time or one forgets how to deploy it properly. So de-skilling may be possible if the ghetto poor were deprived of opportunities to use their ghetto-specific skill set or were prevented from drawing on it. Unless the ghetto poor voluntarily went along with this, such a practice, given the constraints it would impose on them, would raise serious questions about the legitimacy of the state's interference with their liberty. Now, this is, Well, I have to come back to that. Anyway, he says some customs, shaking hands, saying thank you, making eye contact, smiling, enunciating words, become habits. The cultural reformer may therefore seek to change some cultural habits, either by instilling new habits or breaking old ones. Many customs are pre-conscious or second nature and are performed almost involuntarily. Given how difficult it is to control or break a habit once it has formed, the cultural reform of habits could prove morally problematic. Like, if somebody is habituated into a certain practice or they have a certain set of habits, how do you break them? And will it be morally problematic for you to make an attempt to break them? Then he says, even more controversial would be attempts to change the values or the cultural identities of the ghetto poor. Getting into this sensitive terrain might, however, seem unavoidable. some of the relevant cultural traits that appear to be suboptimal, if not destructive, again from the standpoint of escaping poverty, do not concern factual beliefs. And this is important. Some of the relevant cultural traits that appear to be suboptimal do not concern factual beliefs, cultural skills, or customary practices. They have to do with ideals and values, with what ends are desirable and worthwhile. What constitutes a good job? What constitutes success in life? What does it mean to be a responsible parent or to maintain a healthy family? Is it wrong to smoke marijuana or take heroin? Do police officers and the laws they enforce deserve our respect? These and similar questions turn on matters of value. They are normative questions. It is difficult to see how cultural reform could be successful and yet avoid such questions entirely. So he's saying, hey, look, you might have to delve into the reform of values, but then this takes on an entirely different kind of normative impact as opposed to just giving people information and adding skills to their skill sets. Goes on to say, once we know what kind of cultural change is sought and which types of cultural traits are targeted for change, we still need to know which age groups should be targeted. And that's a very important question right there. I give him a bomb right there. Pre-adolescent children are the most malleable, so they seem like the best candidates. So I think that's important. Pre-adolescent children, best candidates. Teenagers and early adolescents from the ages of 10 to 15 may seem promising, even if more challenging, provided their parents are adequately informed about and consent to the programs. Such initiatives are permissible, even if cultural reform takes the form of cultural rehabilitation. So we see here, I'm just using my reason and my factors of logic and ratiocination to basically assess what he's saying here. He's basically saying, hey, yo, if it comes to cultural rehabilitation, which again is an amalgamation of adding and removing cultural traits, okay? Saying it's gonna be more easy to do and more morally permissible to do in young people, particularly pre-adolescent children and, young adults or kids in early adolescence. I think that's the best way to phrase that. He says, even though parental authority can be overridden where there's child abuse, endangerment, or neglect, within these parameters, family autonomy should be respected. So, if a parent wants to enroll his or her child into a program that encourages or engages in cultural reform, this would not be any worse than when parents send their kids to a religious school or a boarding school. So he doesn't find this problematic when it comes to young kids. But he says, shout out to BGS out there, I see, drop a like, motherfuckers. Anyway, he said things get more complicated with late adolescents, ages 16 to 17, and young adults, ages 18 to 25. Given their cognitive, emotional, and moral development, and the imperative to teach them to run their own lives, basically, exercise agency and autonomy, late adolescents, though not adults, are properly allowed, there the word is, autonomy over significant domains of their lives. They are also expected to take full responsibility for many outcomes of their choices, even when these choices could adversely affect their long-term life prospects. This is widely acknowledged, even by the US government, as late adolescents are permitted to drop out of school, to accept employment, and to operate motor vehicles, and are sometimes subject to criminal prosecution as adults. Young adults, assuming no serious mental illness or severe cognitive disabilities, are rightly treated as fully competent to govern their own lives with all the rights and responsibilities this entails. Therefore, cultural reform directed at late adolescents and young adults is potentially more problematic than reform directed at young children. He says, I leave aside older adults as they are unlikely to be viewed as good candidates for cultural reform. We all know why. You can't teach an old dog new tricks. He says, before offering a more in-depth treatment of the practicality and moral permissibility of cultural reform, I outline the particular methods the state might use or sponsor to bring about the relevant changes. So he says, before we even talk about what's practical, what's morally permissible, let's look at what methods the state might use to bring about the relevant changes. How do you engage and enact this cultural reform? He says the cultural augmentation of factual beliefs through the provision of information or rational persuasion is the most benign form of cultural reform. Few would object to this, provided it's based on sound scientific research and is devoid of deception and manipulation. I don't know nowadays, dog. As anti-scientific as our culture is today, and anti-intellectual it is on both the right and the left, not so sure about that today, buddy. Anyway, because now facts, due to post-structuralism and post-modernity, and all of the deconstruction that's taking place, kind of hard to tell nowadays. Some people might say that science is nothing more than a narrative or a frame, a hegemonic frame or a coercive discourse that seeks to, dominate and oppress. But hey, anyway, attempting to eliminate the false factual beliefs of the ghetto poor through information or reason argument isn't problematic either. Things get more complicated with instruction and training programs. Teaching involves the provision of information and dissemination of knowledge, but generally goes well beyond this. It can entail skills training, inculcating desirable habits or breaking undesirable ones, instilling values and shaping identities. The relevant skills, habits, and values can perhaps sometimes be imparted through lectures, discussion, and distributing information. However, sometimes a more directive and supervisory approach with monitoring for rule compliance and mechanisms of accountability is the only effective method. So yeah, sometimes you can persuade people through conversation and talking, but sometimes you might have to go grab the switch. I'm just talking shit. Anyway, he said, counseling can also be used as a cultural reform technique. He doesn't really, bruh, what do you mean when you say directive and supervisory in terms of an approach? Bruh, what? You're not being specific there. I hope that you get into it. Monitoring for rule compliance, like punishment, is that what you mean? Are we talking about corporal punishment? Are we talking about the removal of privileges like watching television or going outside or riding a bike or spending time on an electronic device? Like, what are you talking about, bro? He says counseling can also be used as a cultural reform technique. Such counseling might be no more than advice and encouragement, and so almost as benign as the provision of information or the intervention of a friend. But the counseling could take a more explicitly therapeutic form in which the client is expected to submit to the direction of the counselor. Oh, there we got the dirty word, submit. Ain't nobody in this culture submitting to a damn thing. Not in this culture. Submit. The only thing a motherfucker better do is submit to the will of their mama. Get your black ass in this motherfucking house before I beat your motherfucking ass. You better submit to mama. Anyway, that's just me being ignorant. But it says the counseling could also be faith-based, in which non-rational means of persuasion, such as the exploitation of guilt. Oh, here we go, baby. You're going to burn in hell if you don't get your shit straight. You know you wrong. If you keep doing wrong, you gonna go to hell. You going straight to hell. Would therapeutic or spiritual counseling be problematic as a technique of cultural reform? He says much will depend on the power relationship between the counselor and the client, and in particular, on whether the client has a choice in whether to seek the type of counseling in question, and on whether the client has the option to break off the counseling relationship without repercussions. If poor blacks seek counseling because they believe they have suboptimal cultural traits and think counseling would help these changes, then there's little reason to object to the practice. Of course, if information and reason argument, voluntary educational and training programs, and voluntary counseling services were all that were needed to bring about the relevant cultural changes, cultural reform would not raise such difficult moral questions. One might think that a more aggressive and intrusive approach may appear necessary. However, those selected for cultural reform may not see the need for change even after having been informed of the relevant facts. The cultural traits targeted for change may be recalcitrant. The individual singled out for cultural change may not be disposed to participate in the relevant programs. Even those who do choose to participate may not continue with them long enough or may not fully cooperate with those running the programs. This naturally raises the issue of the permissibility of incentives and sanctions. There's a lot packed into this. Incentives, especially financially ones, may seem benign. No big deal. But when they are conditionally offered to the poor, especially to those severely disadvantaged, they can be morally troubling. I agree with this here, though. I had to give him a bomb here. When one is socioeconomically disadvantaged and in the need of basic resources, it can be very difficult to turn down a financial offer, especially if one has dependents in need of things you cannot provide otherwise. This is him. One could argue this is him caping. Let's keep it a buck, man. You're talking about black women, right? Thus, many among the ghetto poor might participate in cultural reform programs say at the behest of their caseworkers, not because they see value and need a little encouragement or just need a little encouragement, but because they desperately need socioeconomic resources. Depending on their alternatives, they may effectively be compelled to submit to cultural reform, even if they regard it as degrading or insulting. This is a valid point. So we must be careful when describing cultural reform programs as voluntary, as some may constrain freedom in objectionable ways without being strictly coercive. In other words, if you got a person in dire straits and you tell them, well, you know, if you want to have your lights on, then you got to do what the fuck we tell you, and it's demeaning and insulting to what you consider to be your autonomy, well, that's him still coercion. Even if it's not directly coercive, it's indirectly coercive. That's the argument he's making. He says the imposition of penalties raises the most serious worries. So incentive is one thing, but punishment is another matter altogether. So you say you want cultural reform, how you gonna do it? You can either give incentives or you can issue punishment. You can try to use guilt or shame through counseling. Like, how the fuck are you gonna do this? At least he's proposing some shit. How do you do this? The imposition of penalties raises the most serious worries. Not only might the ghetto poor object that they are being forced to submit to a demeaning cultural reform process, but they might also object to any suffering, deprivation, indignities, or loss of liberty such penalties would involve, pointing out that these punitive measures are imposed for their own good won't be an adequate response to these complaints. Some more compelling justification must be offered. And I don't know how long the moral reform part actually is. Let me see. So it starts on 94. I'm not gonna start another section if I can't finish it. So it starts on 94. Okay, then let me make sure. Moral reform starts on 94. It goes on to liberal moral reform. Then it goes to self-respect and injustice. So you know what? I'm going to read a little bit more. What's up, Doc Johnson? What's cracking with you, bro? What's cracking with you? Hit the like button, man. Y'all got me out here naked, man. I don't even know how many people like the video or not. I really don't know, man. But anyway, he goes on to say, having outlined various types of cultural reform, let me focus on the normative and practical implications of one type, which I designate moral reform. Moral reform. He says the moral reform goes beyond correcting mistaken beliefs or expanding the cultural repertoire of the ghetto poor. It is a form of cultural rehabilitation that targets not only beliefs and skills, but habits, values, and identities. The social policy goals of moral reform are to break or limit adherence to suboptimal cultural traits and to instill or strengthen attachment to mainstream cultural traits. The relevant mainstream cultural traits include a commitment to hard work, thrift, economic self-sufficiency, delayed gratification, academic achievement, civility, respect for authority, moderation in drink and play, reverence for the institution of marriage and the nuclear family, and responsible reproduction and good parenting. Though moral reform is sometimes directed towards young children, I focus on moral reform directed at late adolescents and young adults, often designated as youth, as this raises the most difficult issues of political morality. So, I mean, again, he's already said, like, engaging in the moral education, of very young people is not morally problematic, but as people become older and they gain more autonomy and more rights to make choices and decisions on their own and to have to be responsible for them, reforming their morality becomes increasingly problematic. Okay? Whatever the goals you have. Because you got to think, like, who are you to, like, right now people object to being told what to do on moral grounds. You're not the boss of me. How the fuck you gonna tell me what I'm supposed to be doing? Anyway, he says moral reform might be carried out directly by government agencies or accomplished through publicly funded but privately operated and community-based organizations. The kinds of policies, programs, and techniques I have in mind include the following. Moral reform could involve making work or job training a condition for receiving public aid with a view toward instilling an appropriate work ethic, labor force attachment, and the value of economic self-sufficiency. Bro, let's keep it a buck here, man. Let's keep it a fucking bean. He's talking about these chicks out here. He's talking about the guys too, but talk about workfare, it seems like to me, but I'd have to talk to him, send him a message, shoot him a message and some shit. And what do you mean here, bro? But he might even detail it as I proceed to read. So let me, Such a program could include empowering social workers with the authority to regulate the lives of those who rely on public assistance. For example, social workers could threaten to withhold, reduce, or cancel benefits for those who refuse to adhere to work requirements. The government could criminalize vices, drug use, gambling, panhandling, loitering, and prostitution. They already do that. They could criminalize vices associated with a suboptimal ghetto lifestyle or make the abandonment of such practices a condition for housing assistance or other aid. They already do it. They already do it. There could be programs that exhort and counsel the ghetto poor to make more responsible choices about reproduction, marriage, parenting, and so on. Moral reform could involve, as some new integrationist advocate, that's now going back to another term that was explored in chapter 2, moral reform could involve moving poor black people out of ghettos to low poverty white neighborhoods with the expectation that they will come to absorb values and norms of conduct prevalent in these more advantaged communities. BGS! BGS! I'm fucking with you right now, bro. Anyway, the ghetto poor could be given middle-class mentors and role models so that they might come to assimilate mainstream norms and develop cultural capital. The state might enable greater involvement of faith-based institutions or clergy in the lives of the ghetto poor with the expectation that certain religious beliefs and values might take stronger root. Says one important thing to keep in mind about such programs and policies is that even when they take the form of incentives and sanctions, the point of moral reform is not simply to modify behavior, but to restructure the soul. to change fundamentally the values, character, and identity of those in the grip of what are regarded as debilitating cultural patterns. Now this is an important, must be highlighted. Must be highlighted. Says the important thing to keep in mind about such programs and policies is that even when they take the form of incentives and sanctions, the point of moral reform is not simply behavior modification, but the restructuring of the soul. To fundamentally change the values, the character, and the identity of those in the grip of what are regarded as debilitating cultural patterns. Shout out to E. Taylor. He says they had that same program in Washington, D.C. It was called the Work Ethic Camp. They had moral recognition therapy classes. Damn. Moral recognition therapy? What the fuck? Man, that shit crazy as a motherfucker. Crazy. He says, to use an expression coined in another context by Kwame Anthony Appiah, like moral reform. Got a name drop a motherfucking colleague, huh? Moral reform would be a type of soul making that a state might engage in to help citizens lead more successful lives. The idea behind moral reform is that once the reform is complete, after the programs are over and the incentives and sanctions are no longer being applied, those who have undergone the reform process will now govern themselves in accordance with mainstream norms without further special interventions. To use the language of the medical model, cultural reform is an antidote or treatment for the cultural ailments that afflict the ghetto poor. That's important. And look, the great thing about analytic philosophy is that there's foreshadowing about each position, but predetermined upon prior norms, principles, or ideals that have been set out beforehand. Now, he's already critiqued the medical model, and he perceives, one could argue, that cultural reform, specifically moral reform, is a form of trying to apply the medical model, which abstracts away from observing problems related to justice in a society. It creates blind spots. This is what he's going to argue. So we've already been through that before, though. I'm not gonna go over that right now. Okay. And this is the last section I'm going to read. It's relatively short. Liberal moral reform, question mark. Liberal, quote unquote, moral reform, question mark. Social conservatives who advocate moral reform tend to view it, sometimes along with private charity, as the sole remedy for ghetto poverty, because they generally regard the basic structure of U.S. society as just and not in need of fundamental, that's the status quo problem, right? This is one thing he says. They generally regard the basic structure of U.S. society as just and thus not in need of fundamental reform, at least not in an egalitarian direction. Libertarians would presumably not accept moral reform as a legitimate aim of government, at least when dealing with adults, because they do not regard the state as having the authority to interfere with the personal choices of adult citizens. Indeed, they generally believe it is impermissible for the government to take paternalistic actions and that the state's authority is limited to protecting basic rights. And a lot of conservatives, I just don't understand. Like, on the one hand, they're advocates of negative liberty, but on the other hand, they're these great moral reformers, and they have, like this Judeo-Christian ethic that they insist upon shoving down people's throats. It's almost incommensurable. These philosophical orientations, they almost seem mutually exclusive. But I mean, just because you're a social conservative doesn't mean you're a libertarian. So, but to the extent to which you believe, you know, like you're a classical liberal, you believe in minimal government involvement in the personal life of an individual, to the extent that that's your viewpoint, you know, I just find it difficult to, you know, reconcile that viewpoint with, you know, the conservative religious rights idea about morality and how it should be enacted upon people, especially people who just so happen to be the most kind of poor and impoverished people, okay? But that's just my view. He says, on their view, citizens should be free to have a bad character and to embrace self-destructive cultural traits, the libertarians, provided enacting these dispositions do not violate the rights of others. Moreover, libertarians generally do not believe that the state should institute redistributive schemes to reduce inequality or social welfare measures to alleviate poverty, at least not using public funds extracted through taxation. But can liberals consistently support moral reform? And I think he's going to say, he's got to be able to say that there's a way to do this. Can liberals consistently support moral reform? A liberal who supported moral reform would presumably view such measures as only part of the solution to ghetto poverty. State-sponsored moral reform would have to be joined with policy efforts to make the opportunity structure fairer and State-sponsored moral reform would have to be joined with policy efforts to make the opportunity structure fairer. So again, he's talking about the basic structure of society, and the distribution of resources more equitable. Liberals who accept the suboptimal cultural divergence thesis typically regard the relevant cultural traits as a response, perhaps not fully conscious or deliberate, to unjust structural conditions. These injustices include pervasive racial discrimination, for example, in employment, housing, lending, and law enforcement, perhaps rising to the level of institutional racism. Diminished life prospects due to unfair economic and educational disadvantages, inadequate public services, and the fact that the social safety net is not large enough and has too many holes to catch all those who fall because of economic restructuring, recessions, and unexpected shifts in the labor market. He said, I won't discuss directly conservative or libertarian perspectives on moral reform in ghettos, though some of what I say has implications for these views. While liberals obviously disagree about the extent of its unfairness, they generally concur that the structure of U.S. society is unfair. Liberals also tend to think that government should do something proactive about poverty, instituting feasible anti-poverty measures as necessary. Some might therefore be tempted to accept, or indeed may wholeheartedly endorse, moral reform as part of a liberal solution to the problem of ghetto poverty. And yet, liberal moral reform is neither wise nor morally coherent because it does not give proper weight to the importance of self-respect. So there you have, now you're getting to what he thinks. So I'm gonna highlight that. And if you got anything you want to add at this moment, I'll give you the opportunity to do so. I'll be back. When I come back, if there's nobody in the chat, nobody stepping up to speak about this ghetto cultural shit, I'm about to go eat some chili. I made some chili yesterday. That shit was fire. About to put some cheese in it and get some Ritz crackers and get into it. So I'll be right back. All right, I see ain't nobody came in, but my whole thing is if you got so many suggestions about what to do and how to do it in relation to the black community, I thought you motherfuckers would have a whole bunch to say about cultural reform, seeing as to how, you morally condemn Negroes all day, every day. Talk about strags and shit. Talk about pookies and shit. I'm already assuming that y'all got a whole lot to say. How you doing, lady?
I'm doing well. I don't have any suggestions.
I forget your name. I can't remember what it is.
I'm Queen Sunkissed.
There we go. Sunkissed. What's cracking?
I got no suggestions. I came to get your chili recipe, though.
Oh, shit. I'm going to tell you how to do it, though. So you take ground beef. You know what I'm saying? You take 2 cans of tomato sauce. You take some chili beans. I prefer bush beans, kidney, medium. You feel me?
Yeah.
I take a half a teaspoon of cumin. I take a half a teaspoon of salt or a little less. You can salt and pepper your stuff to taste, but I don't really put nothing but cumin in it.
Mm-hmm.
Salt and pepper. But don't use more than a half a teaspoon of salt. Don't do that because you don't want to eat a whole you don't want to eat a whole batch of salty chili. You feel me?
Right.
And then you gotta cut up your onion and your bell pepper. I just used like a whole onion and a quarter of a bell pepper.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? Like about a cup of onion and a quarter of a bell pepper. And I put cayenne in mine though, because I like spicy chili.
Mm-hmm.
But, that's an option. That's on that's on you. That's optional. That's on you though. But cumin and chili powder, 3. You gotta have the chili powder. I almost forgot that. But you need like 3 to 4 tablespoons of chili powder. So those are the seasonings: chili powder, cumin, ground cumin, salt and pepper, and tomato sauce, not paste. Tomato sauce, 2 cans. The short boys, the little cans.
Right.
Don't put 2 big old cans of sauce in no chili, man. It's fucked
right.
up. That ain't how you do it. It ain't gonna be good.
All right.
Yeah. This Rogan say put a little smoked paprika in it. No, I don't. No. Some people do put paprika in there. I personally, I don't want paprika in my chili, man. I get down with 3 or 4 tablespoons of chili powder, half a teaspoon of ground cumin. You can salt and pepper your shit to your taste, but you gotta have them 2 cans of tomato sauce, 1 16 I guess ounce can of chili beans. I prefer light kidney beans. You know what I'm saying, with some sort of some kick to it, and I don't like dark kidney beans. I don't like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's it.
Oh, that's it. You don't put no meat in the chili?
Of course. Well, I thought that was what I was saying, like a pound.
Oh,
of ground
beef. Okay.
Yeah, a pound of ground beef, or you can put turkey meat in your chili if you don't like ground beef. Some people don't like, beef.
Nah, I eat the cow. We gonna eat that.
Yeah, put some ground. You gotta put a pound. This is for a pound of ground beef. That's what.
Okay.
I do. Yeah, so that shit fire, boy. It's super fire. It's simple too. It don't take a long time to do. And so I just.
I'm gonna try your recipe.
Hmm.
I'm gonna
Yeah,
try
I
your
put
recipe.
Janfar. I put cayenne in there. Huh? Say what now?
I said I'm gonna try your recipe.
Man, you gonna have to kiss your ass to get the taste out of your mouth. Oh. I wish I had a doom doom. I ain't even got one. I wish I had one though.
Ah,
Yeah,
that's hilarious.
yeah. You got to. You know, my uncle used to say that all the time. He's like, cause he like to cook a lot. You know what I'm saying? He'll be like, you that shit so good, boy. You know, you gotta kiss your ass to get the taste out your mouth.
That's funny. I've never heard that one before.
Yeah, yeah.
Well,
That's how they
thanks
get
for
down.
sharing your recipe with me.
For sure, you got it. Everybody got it now. Like a whole bunch. I don't believe in all that old. We gonna hide the recipe type of shit. Fuck all that.
Oh yeah, I hide a recipe.
Yeah, well, okay. Well, you
Can't
got to
get out my
divulge. All
recipes.
right, then. Okay, well, then you got to give me one now. I just gave you one. You got to give me one then.
Well, what you want?
I don't know what you got this fire.
Everything I cook is fire.
Okay, yeah. All right.
And just go to my channel. Look at my cooking playlist.
Oh, okay. So you keep your shit on your channel.
Yeah, I go live and cook.
Straight up. I ain't know that though. Okay, so what would you say is your top in the top 5 your family? You know, you ain't got to tell me all
Let
of
me
them, but
see.
what's the top in your playlist? What's up, Dr. Thunder? What's cracking with you, baby?
They like my broccoli and cheese casserole.
Broccoli and cheese casserole?
Yeah.
Ain't no meat in it?
Of course, it has chicken in it.
All right, so how you get down with that? See, you know what I really like? You make
What?
like chicken Alfredo, blackened chicken Alfredo, something like that?
Oh yeah, I do that too.
You do it from scratch or do you buy Alfredo sauce?
If I feel like having doing a labor of love, I make it from scratch.
All right, you gotta give me that recipe.
Oh, okay. Well, okay. I got two different like cheese sauce recipes,
Okay.
but you'll figure it out. Uh, you want your parmesan, you want some cream, and you want the parmesan on the block because I grate my cheese. I don't buy it already shredded. It just tastes better when you shred it yourself.
For sure, for sure.
So you want to put your butter in the pan, put the cream in there, and gradually add the shredded cheese into the sauce.
Okay.
Add some salt and pepper and a little bit of nutmeg.
A
I know
little
that sounds
nutmeg?
crazy. It sounds crazy, but
But you ain't got no measurements for this shit. You just be eyeballing and tongue licking and
yeah, I be in there talking to the ancestors. You know what I'm saying?
okay. Okay, hey. Okay, well, go ahead. Okay, a little bit, a pinch of nutmeg.
Yeah, just a little pinch of nutmeg, about about 4 tablespoons of butter,
Okay.
a whole carton of cream, not the big one, the little short one, the half pint,
Okay.
and I say about a cup of parmesan, maybe more. It just depends on how much you can do that to taste, because as you add the cheese, it'll put all the salt and the stuff in there. So you can do that to taste. And you just stir that up, and while you working on that, you boil your noodles.
Right,
Now, I ain't
right,
making
right,
no
right.
noodles from scratch. It's too much work.
No, yeah. I wouldn't expect that. You know what I'm saying? That's a whole nother that's a whole nother joint right there.
And then you just, sometimes I season my noodles, sometimes I don't.
Okay.
And I just pour that sauce over it, and the chicken. I usually just get a Tony Cherry's black and season it and use that to sear the chicken.
Tony Cacheray, you mean?
Yeah, that dude.
Okay, yeah. Tony Cacheray, man, I fucks with Tony.
Yeah, I like that black and seasoning. Pretty
Okay.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah, you cooked it. Make sure you got to make sure you cook the chicken all the way through.
Of course, yeah, of course.
And then I let it rest for like 5 minutes before I cut it, so it don't tear up my meat and look good on my plate.
Right. Yeah, so I'm gonna have to try that, man. You know, cause I like the Zatarain kind, but like I buy it frozen sometimes. But like I want to make my own. You know what I'm saying? Cause I know making your own sometimes is better than buying somebody else's. You feel me?
Yeah, it's real quick. It's easy. The hardest part is melting that cheese inside of that cream.
Yeah, you can burn it if you don't watch it.
Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah, you burn it. Yeah,
I
but
keep my heat on kind of medium low.
yeah, I don't cook fast, man. I cook everything slow. I mean, unless I'm trying to sear it, you know what I'm saying, in order to put like a little, a little edge on it. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
But everything I'm cooking slow. I don't cook shit fast. Feel me?
Already. That's the
You know
best
what I'm
way to
saying?
cook.
Yeah, hey, that's the key right there. That's how you cook with love. People that fuck up food really ain't paying attention to what they doing. You know what I'm
Oh yeah,
saying?
they and then it'll make you sick too. Don't eat
Yeah,
nobody food. They ain't
yeah,
put no
yeah,
love in it.
yeah, for
Or
sure, for
they
sure.
they in the kitchen cooking while they mad. Don't eat that.
No,
What's happening,
yeah,
Gigi?
yeah. What's happening with you, Leon? What's cracking with you, bro?
Nothing much. I just picked up my son from his grandma's house, and I'm about to go 2 blocks to my mom's house and drop off my son and continue studying for this test. But
Well, good luck with that, man.
oh yeah, it's going good. It's going good. I just wrote a paper. And I guess another lady passed away while giving birth, but particularly the same group. About 3 years ago, they were talking about. It was at a conference. A lady, I think she was from Philly. She was having a program for young inner city boys, and they continue to have these programs, but they don't really show results. And it's I get that you can select the few kids that excel in if it's education or sports, but when it boils down to it, like it's so indoctrinated, and we see it in our families. It's like, okay, I can be successful, you can be successful, but there's a group of them that it's like it's so ingrained that it's almost impossible to solve. It doesn't matter if there's programs around or anything else, and it's like reading this, listening to you read this book, just it is like clearly what we see continuously.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, this guy's just taking what people propose in a folk wisdom kind of way. He takes it to his logical conclusion and says, okay, what is possible in the realm or in the domain of cultural reform? Like, what can you do? Who can you actually impact and change, or who can you develop and mold and shape into what you consider to be the type of citizen that would be a mainstream, viable, well-ordered citizen. Like how do you do that, right? Now, one thing that kind of I think is lost in the conversation about this is that and it was never mentioned by him. He started to mention it. Like if I go back a couple of pages and he talked about soul alteration and soul changing. That's what moral reform pretty much consists in. But look, man, the state already creates the soul of a citizen. It's already engaged. The state, from its, like the education that you give, the media that you allow, the ends that you tell people are valuable. Like I'm going back to Aristotle. This is what I would
Yeah.
do in order to, I would, if I had a question to ask Tommy Shelby, and I could email the dude and be like, or hit him up on Facebook and say, well, maybe you didn't factor or consider that the state is already engaged in making the souls of its citizens. Maybe not directly, but to some degree, even directly, because the state determines what kind of ends. Like in the politics, I think, or even, no, I think it's the Nicomachean Ethics. Aristotle talks about this. Like, well, the state, it sets the ends that everybody else has as an end in and of itself. Like whatever end it is you decide, the state is determining what the overarching ends are going to be because it determines what is valuable to citizens by incentivizing certain activities and disincentivizing others. You know what I'm saying? So I know that's pretty convoluted, man, but in terms of reforming kids, man, like my view, I don't have a problem with reform per se, but you got to change the structural conditions as well. Like, so I think that's where he's going with this. Like, moral reform is good, but moral reform without an alteration of justice in the United States is some bullshit.
Oh, I agree because when when you just break down like places that have lead paint or lead pipes, corroded this, corroded that, and the conditions. Without changing those conditions, I mean, you're still going to see the same thing continuously, and
Yeah, I
that's
mean,
that's what I'm worried about.
yeah, well, no child or no citizen deserves to, like, say for example what happened in Flint, Michigan. No citizen deserves to live in a city if they're paying taxes and contributing towards what would or should be allocated towards infrastructure. Nobody deserves to live in conditions like that.
No, they
Not
don't.
not in the civilized world, not in a first world country. That's some bullshit.
It is. It is.
Like you. Yeah, go ahead, Snow.
I grew up on the south side of Chicago, and beginning with my high school years, it just got progressively worse.
Really?
And, yeah, it did. Beginning with my own neighborhood.
Which neighborhood is yours in Chicago?
I live toward Morgan Park on 111th Street on the south side.
Okay, yeah, you passed King Drive and all that. So
yeah, I'm past Roseland. I'm what I grew up west of Halsted Street.
Yeah, you even passed Chicago State,
which is where I got my broadcast career started. Oddly enough,
really.
And
yeah, my father used to work at Chicago State, and he had a lot of friends who were members of the faculty there.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to spend some. Yeah, go ahead.
I try to offer services to them, and all I ask is that they pay me so I can make a living. Do I have to give you the second half of that equation?
Well, hey, getting paid, man. You talking about Chicago State paying you?
Uh-huh.
For doing broadcast work, you mean? That's what you're talking about?
Yes.
Yeah, that's.
Like I said, do I need to explain the second half of that equation?
No, you really don't. No, you really don't.
Do I need to explain why the Chicago Public League tried to cut my organization loose, accusing us of giving plays out over the public address when I'm strapped to a headset?
Wow. So they like you're inciting riots and shit like that.
I'm giving 1998. I beg your pardon. 1998. I'm doing a game at one of the CPS stadiums, and I'm not even in the stadium yet. And I'm getting ready to go in, get set up because I was running late coming from work, and I'm getting ready to get set up, and someone's on the public address mic calling out the formation. I hadn't even seen any of the game yet, and yet someone recognized me and immediately blamed me.
Yeah, I don't know why. I don't know why or how, but you must have said something political before that didn't jive for somebody, and so
I came in and did a job with my own organization and not theirs.
Oh yeah, that'll do it. That'll do it.
I formed my own broadcast company, and I didn't go through any of the quote unquote established Chicago broadcast companies. I formed my own.
But you're in your right to do, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I go see Mount Carmel and Brother Rice in the Chicago Catholic League, and they're like, come on down. We got you. Stay with them for 12 years.
Brother Rice is a high school, ain't it?
Yes.
Because my brother went to Brother Rice. You know what I'm saying? So I do it. Yeah, I remember.
99 Pulaski.
Yeah, I remember that school, man. Yeah. But I'm not from Chicago, so I used to visit Chicago. I had one job in Chicago. It was at Jewel Osco.
Oh my Lord! Now you're bringing back memories.
Yeah, I had a job right up there on King Drive, and right. It's right. They used to have a Harold's Chicken over there and a Doc's in the same area.
103rd.
But I think the Doc's is gone now.
103rd and King Drive. I believe that's it.
No, it's 87th and King Drive.
It's 87th. My mistake.
Yeah.
Right. That's where the big Jewel. That's where one of the big Jewel Osco stores was.
Yeah, that's where I worked at, man. Like it was a Harold's Chicken and a Doc's.
And a Doc's.
Yeah, and then you had the Jewels, and they had a Foot Locker.
Right across the way from the Dan Ryan Express.
Yes, sir.
Right across the way from the Dan Ryan Expressway.
Yeah, that's why I used to work, man. I had to, I was the high schooler, man. I had pushing carts
Nice.
and shit. It's hot as hell in the summertime. Chicago, boy, it's hot as hell.
Yeah, man.
Ooh, boy,
Yeah, man. I mean, when it gets hot in Chicago, it gets hot.
man.
It
But
gets hot.
so my favorite thing to do in Chicago when I was in high school, man, I used to go to Hyde Park,
Yes.
and they had a radio station, a college radio station. I think I forget it was the University of Chicago. They had a radio station called WHPK.
Okay.
And they used to play hip hop music. And we used to go there. Me and
Right.
this guy, man, we used to go there and fuck with the DJs up there. And because I was a DJ myself, you know what I'm saying? So we could
Nice.
go up, we would
Very
go
nice.
up there and just vibe off hip hop. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
But hip hop was different back then, man. It ain't like it
Yeah,
is
it
today,
was.
bro.
It was real back then.
Yeah, man.
It was real. I cut my teeth, like I said, at Chicago State doing play-by-play for their teams, and I kept adding teams throughout the years. And then when I ventured into high school sports, I'm like, screw it. I don't care how long it takes me. I'm going to find a way to make a living. And now
Right.
with me recently just getting the wonderful news that I'm in remission from stage 4 pancreatic cancer.
Oh, man. God damn, man. Applause for that, man.
Yeah, man.
God bless you for that, man.
Got diagnosed in July of 21 before my 49th birthday. And now a few months from birthday number 51, I'm in remission.
Damn, boy. God bless you on that one, man.
Thank you.
That's serious shit, bro.
So my wife, Jody, and I talk about her a lot, said, once you get the call that you're in remission, we are the fuck up out of Indiana for good. I said, baby, you said nothing but a word. Because once I got diagnosed, she says, I want you to get well. I want you to get stronger. Fuck what everybody else heard. Fuck what everybody else said. Because Duke Hospital actually told Jody to get her affairs in order because they're basically saying, put this nigga in the box.
Yeah, pancreatic cancer ain't no joke, bro.
No, it's not.
That's right around your liver, you know what I'm saying?
But fortunately, Dr. Attila Nakib, who just recently relocated away from IU Med Center, looked me in the eye and said, we'll get this motherfucker for you. And April 4th last year, went in for a 5-hour surgery and got the tumor out and got stronger from there. And we weren't supposed to get the call until April 4th, which is our 1-year anniversary of my surgery. Yeah, Dr. Roganoff had other ideas down here in Southern Indiana in Columbus. When Jody said, we're waiting for our 1-year anniversary to get the call that we're in remission. And his next sentence to me was, oh, the remission's already started.
Yeah, that's dope, man. That's dope, man. My stepfather died of pancreatic cancer, man. You know what I'm saying?
God bless him.
He was 80 plus, you know what I'm saying? So,
yeah.
But God, like older people, man, it's difficult for them to bounce back from ailments like that. You know what I'm saying?
This victory is not just for me, it's for every cancer survivor and cancer victim. Because if one life can be saved from cancer, I want to be an inspiration to men who suffer from cancer, or be an inspiration to the souls of the ones whose lives were claimed by cancer. I want to be that inspiration to any and everybody. And it's like I close my morning show with every day, dream big, do bigger. My biggest dream was beating pancreatic cancer. Now we're going to do bigger and turn this story and my company into $1 billion annually.
That's right, man. Make it happen, man.
Oh, we're going to. And you are one of my inspirations, my friend, with the content that you put out, and that you constantly put out. Something that my sister said in jest, and I won't say in jest. One thing that my sister said, to kind of like keep me depressed was, you got no time to be depressed. And she said that right after the time my dad died in 2007. Well, now with beating pancreatic cancer, I can say she's right. I don't have any time to be depressed, although I fight it on a daily basis.
Yeah, man. You know, the world is rough, man. It's harsh, man. You know what I'm
It
saying?
is.
And you know, we all living, but you
Mm-hmm.
know, none of us can live forever. You know what I'm saying? So you know, you got to understand. You know, time is
Yeah.
precious, man. You know, and you know, life. I said, you know, a long time ago. You know, live life to the fullest because you never know when God gonna pull it in the
Right.
blink of an eye, faster than the speeding bullet. You know what I'm
Mm-hmm.
saying? So you gotta. It's hard, you know. Sometimes, you know, I don't do a lot of inspirational videos and shit like that. I used to, but I started a series where you know it's like you know understand that you're valuable. That you know the world may seem rough, but you can keep pushing. You can persevere through the pain, and
Yeah.
you know the light will shine again. You know what I'm saying? Eventually. But you
Well,
know we
my
got to keep a
queen,
positive mindset. It ain't easy, man, in this culture,
it
man. But you
really
know,
isn't. Well,
but it's possible. You know what I mean?
I found my queen Jody at age 46, and we have been together it'll be 5 years in June and 4 years married, same month.
For sure, man. God bless
Just
that,
later
man.
this
You
month,
know,
man.
well, she, you know, if she rolled with you through cancer, dog, you know, she a rider. So, you know
She's
what I'm
ten
saying?
toes. She is 10 toes deep for me as I am for her.
You got to say, I say 12 toes in.
There you
You
go.
know, 12
the,
toes. I'm 12 toes in
the
this
toes,
bitch. You know what
the
I'm saying?
toes and the hands are knee deep and tied in. They're knee deep and tied in.
Yeah, man. But is there anything you want to say related to ghetto shit, man? Like, you know, because today the
Been there,
conversation is
done
about
that.
ghetto culture.
Been there, done that. Saw that at Fenger High School for 4 years, and did everything I could to swerve around it. Because
Right.
I got approached by gangbangers. I got approached by so many hood rats. It's not even funny telling me, "Oh, what are you going to school for?" Because my dad will kick my ass if I don't.
Yeah, you know, like I was kind of shielded, not all the way, but for a
Mm-hmm.
lot of the rigmarole in my neighborhood, I was shielded from precisely because, you
Same.
know, I went to better schools or whatever the case may be. I went to the equivalent of a Brother Rice in
I got
St.
you.
Louis, but it wasn't really, you know, it was a Catholic school, but it wasn't for black kids. It was a school
It
for
was
white kids.
it was a real Catholic school.
Yeah, for sure.
It was a real Catholic school. But like I said, been there, seen that, done that, got the T-shirt, and to use my wife's Southern tongue, burnt the son bitch when I got done with it.
Yeah, I had to fight some gang motherfucking bangers in Chicago, man. They, you know, was trying to fuck with my little brother and shit, man.
You
We
don't
was
have to
hooping in
tell
that.
me
We was hooping
twice.
in the alleyway, man, on the south side,
Yeah.
and you know, he had a little basketball court. Some dude stole his starter jacket or some shit. He had a Boston Celtics starter jacket back in the
Oh,
day. Motherfucker stole his jacket and shit and then tried to flex on, you know, I came down from the summer and I'm bigger than my brother is. And I'm like,
right.
man, I'm like, man, I don't give a fuck about your gang, nigga. You know what I'm
Exactly.
saying? You know, like, I don't give a fuck about GDs, VLs, and none of that shit.
Same.
What's cracking? You know what I'm saying? Like, when you want it, you can get it, motherfucker. You know
Mm-hmm.
what I'm saying? And
And
he,
I
you know,
never, I never gave a fuck about. I never gave a fuck about gangbanging. Never gave a fuck about that culture. And I can tell you, there are still people today that I graduated with, that are still in the best word I can use. That are still in that squalor, and they support it proudly. And I'm like, not me. No.
I had a good time participating because I grew up in Texas, so it's like
Okay.
neighborhood games. Neighborhood games is a normal thing, and it's like if you're there, you have to participate in part of the riot of fighting, and it's
Mm-hmm.
usually like 20 to 30 to 40 of us. It used to be fun, but it got to a point like you want to take your girlfriend to the movies or the carnival, and you go with her, but you get
Right.
jumped. Yeah,
Yep.
it gets to that type of issue.
Well, they
Now,
had
Um,
see, I don't know how old y'all are, but like I do know
35.
Snowman just said how old he was. He said he was in his 50s.
Yeah,
Uh,
I'll turn 51 in July.
so yeah, you know, like I'm just a little bit older than you, but so because I turned 51 in 52 in May. You know what I'm saying?
Nice. Very congrats on
So
number 52, man.
yeah, for sure. But like, so here's the deal. Like when I was younger, man, motherfuckers used to fight and shit.
Mm-hmm.
Even knife play was a part of it, but all that shooting and popping pistols and shit, I didn't start seeing that, man, until the the early '90s.
Yeah, same here.
Like we didn't like, and like there were no gang. There were gangs because in East St. Louis you had gangs that were emulating Chicago gangs. So you had Vice Lords, Gangster Disciples, and shit like that.
Yeah.
Motherfuckers talking about King David and Larry Hoover and all this bullshit. I'm like, oh, man, I don't know none of that because I used to have girlfriends in East St. Louis too.
Right.
But I never, like I went to college in '89, so I went off to college. I graduated from high school in '89, went to college in '89 in New Orleans. And motherfuckers was pistol playing more in New Orleans than they were in St. Louis.
Yeah.
Okay. And
New Orleans, yeah.
But when I went back home and the movie Colors had come out, man, I remember my mom sent me a videotape. Like she used to send me care packages and shit with like tapes on the VHS. Because I didn't have cable and I was living off campus by myself.
Right.
But she would send me like care packages and they would have VHS tapes, and one of the movies was Colors.
Right.
And I'm watching this shit. I'm like, okay, gang bangers, and because it was some cats. It was some cats at Xavier who were from LA, and they were in gangs, but they were leaving that life behind, and in pursuit of higher education. It's being exposed to a different culture and seeing different people from Atlanta, Houston, Chicago, Kansas City, Memphis. People from everywhere, you know what I'm saying? So, and then some of the kids were rich and wealthy. Some of the kids just, lower middle class. Some of them broke, you know what I mean? But we all vibe because, but it was just dope. But the whole thing is, I went back to St. Louis. I didn't go back the first summer.
Right.
I stayed, I think it was 91 when I went back. And I'm seeing all these cats wearing blue and red. I'm like, what the fuck is this shit?
What the fuck just happened?
What is this? Well, I couldn't believe it, man. Like I was kind of spellbound by seeing that. I was like, man, you mean these cats are these influenced? But but you also have to understand that a lot of the guys from Cali, they started, like franchising, crack sales and shit like that. Like, so that's the reason why you saw it. It wasn't just cats just jocking it.
No.
As much as it was, these cats really actually started franchising, like crack dealing, and but it kind of shocked. And then gunplay was a part of life from then on in. You know what I mean? So I try to stay away from it. You can't avoid it all the way completely if you still live there.
No, you can't.
Because somebody will suck you into that shit. You know what I mean? But
there's a comment saying stealing starter jackets was a real thing. Yeah, it was a real thing because my sister got me a jacket of one of my favorite college teams, University of Illinois. And I was home from Christmas break, 1990. I wasn't going to wear that around the hood. December 1990, wearing a starter jacket? No, that got packed in my travel bag, and I took it right on to Missouri with me. No,
motherfuckers was still in Jordans too, man.
Oh, shit. I know. Yeah, they were doing that when they premiered.
When the Jordans right off your feet, boy.
Yep, when they hit the streets, really deep in '87, they were stealing them off your feet. And I got that starter jacket from my sister, Big Chief Illini Weck on the side of the jacket.
Oh no!
I packed that sumbitch up, and when it was time for me to get on the train and head back to college, that came with me.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah,
and that's the only time I pulled it out was when I was at college. The only time I pulled it out.
Yeah, bro. Like back in the day, man. Like when I was a young kid, man, they used to steal Chuck Taylors.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? And then they went from the Chuck Taylors to the I forget the name of them shoes. They not Air Forces, but they like the Laker type shoe with the star on it.
Converse.
Yeah, but they Converse, but I don't know what the name of them is. It could have been Magic Johnsons. I don't know what they are, but
yeah.
But the whole point is they start stealing them. Then they went from stealing them. When Jordan came out, they started stealing the Jordans. But I never was into the Jordans though. I was like, man, I'm not spending. I'm not even asking nobody. Like you're in high school. I'm not working. I used to wash pots and pans at a hospital and shit.
Dr. J was the shoes they were stealing. They're one of the original Converse because Dr. J, Magic, and Larry Bird all wore Converses.
Damn.
And Jordan hit the scene with the Air Jordans in 85, 84.
Yeah, them jokers. I mean, they was. Well, I wasn't really a sneakerhead back then, but the shoes. I'm gonna tell you what shoes we used to wear. As a kid, in grade school, we was wearing kangaroos, Chuck Taylors. Okay, then we went from kangaroos and Chuck Taylors to hip hop started off. Then it was Reeboks.
Yep.
K-Swiss.
Yes.
Dope Man Nikes.
Yes.
Pumas.
All of it.
Adidas Shell Toes. Then we started wearing Troops and Filas. Then we started wearing what else we was wearing?
Fila and Reebok were the rage of the 90s. Even though Jordans were outselling everything. Jordans were outselling everything.
So, we had our kicks, man. Nike was always.
Yeah, it was.
Whatever it is, and then you start seeing the Maxes come out, you know what I'm saying? So everybody was on them, but
yeah.
I still was a little bit preppy though, man. I used to wear penny loafers and shit, man. You know what I'm saying? I used to wear polo shirts, button downs and shit back in the day, man. I was fresh
when
to
it
death,
was
man.
When it was time for me to take care of business school wise, I'm talking about science fairs and after school clubs, I took after my dad and wore a shirt and tie. And dad would help me pick which shirt and tie to use, whether if it was for the science club or for the math club or whatever. When they have meetings after school, they see me come in with a briefcase and a shirt and tie. And of course, I get the stare of all stares and like, why are you looking like such a nerd? Because that's what my dad taught me. And it holds true to this day for me.
I just remember when I was in high school, though. See, like, because I went to a Catholic high school, you could wear whatever you want, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
But you couldn't wear jeans, and you had to tuck your shirt in, and you had to have a belt. You couldn't
exactly.
You got to have a belt. Some days you had to have ties. They made you wear ties on certain days.
Yes.
So our shirts had to have collars. You couldn't wear polo shirts like the knit polos where you can pull over your head and all that.
Yes.
No, you gotta have button ups.
Gotta have button ups.
So I was used to, like we would get like Argyle socks, different, weird looking color socks and shit.
Oh yeah.
So golf pants and shit. We were doing all kind of crazy dressing, man. Polo, that was the high premium, boy. We still white boys for they polos all day. Cause we went to school with some rich ass white dudes.
Yeah,
it's fucked up.
Yeah,
but we'd take they bomber jackets, all kind of shit, man. We was taking everything, man. It was wrong. You know what I'm saying? But that's what we were doing. I figured like, fuck it. They stole our shit from our ancestors. Fuck it. We gonna take some shit back from them. Fuck them.
Right.
I mean, that's how we were thinking. You know what I'm saying? So,
yeah.
But in retrospect, man, that shit was childish. You know what I'm saying? And they ain't had nothing particularly necessarily to do with slavery, but still we was like, fuck them though. We was so bad, man. We was stealing credit cards from teachers' desks and shit, man. It was wrong. We was fucked up, bro.
Yeah.
We was wrong, bro. You know
when the teachers thought it was safe to leave things in their desk.
Man. But I mean, you're around the black kids, man. We was just reckless with the shit we was doing too. But you couldn't, like shit we did back then, you can't do today. They got cameras and shit. There wasn't no cameras everywhere when we was kids.
You got cameras everywhere now.
Everywhere, bro.
One of the things I used to do when I would walk home from 112th and Wallace to 110th and Peoria, right up Halstead Street, right toward 111th, there was a candy store that had some arcade games. All those arcade games ate my allowance. After school every day, I had to go play Pac-Man. I had to go play Centipede. I had to go play something.
Shit, I was a video gamer myself. Miss Pac-Man,
Donkey Kong, Frogger. Oh my gosh.
So Cubert. Oh man, I'm playing all them shit.
I got to press
all that shit.
I got to press
back in the day, boy. But all I can say is, bro,
I got a present for you. I got a present for you, GG. You remember when Street Fighter premiered in the 90s, right?
Yeah, I never was into Street Fighter though, but I mean,
Tiger uppercut.
Yeah, I remember that shit.
Uppercut. I'm. Where is it? Then of course, I got Pac-Man in here somewhere.
Oh wow, yeah.
And
Yeah, that's it. That's it right there. Yeah, that's it right there.
Yo,
if you
GG.
eat one of those
Oh, man.
power pellets,
That's my jam right there. Leon, go. Leon say he want to get a word in. What's
go
cracking?
ahead. Go ahead.
So when it comes to what he's talking about in this book, like in the area I live in, like say if a kid is excelling, they can switch his school and give them a stipend for a bus ride or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like I see like things they do if they see a child accelerate with education or whatever else.
Right.
Then the feminists be saying we need woman only neighborhoods, and they have those now. So
Mm-hmm.
and it's like okay, if I read both sides, you see a lot of shit that can't be solved. Like we talked about the age of when boys and girls start having sex, all that kind of shit.
Right.
But I look at that as stuff that can't be solved just with people coming in and trying to change the culture because so the in my mind the only thing I see is improving the infrastructure of the place and
Mm-hmm.
pulling kids out that accelerate because it's like you got grown poor people that you can't save. You can't change their mindset.
No, you can't.
Um, we can't change certain of our cousins' mindset by the age of 20ish. Like you can help your cousin get into trade school or get a CDL or something.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes even in certain fields you get them in, if it's like a warehouse, they're
Yeah.
still bringing the same thoughts to the job, and they fail sometimes, and it's maybe I just look at it like at a certain age, some of these motherfuckers can't be safe because they're so indoctrinated to it.
And they're
They
so set in their ways.
yeah, and it's like we make jokes about like black women. They go work for the white man and act proper and act how they should
Mm-hmm.
act, and
Mm-hmm.
it's like you can't teach the boys how to do it. You know what I'm saying? And
Yeah.
I
it's
think
like
but so here's my thing, right? So like I don't want to let the cat out of the bag about where Shelby is going with all of this, but I think what he's gonna say is something similar to what you said. Like you got to work on improving the infrastructure, which is responsible for the creation of ghettos to begin with. Like America created ghettos on purpose. This was a purposeful, manifestation of neglect. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
you can do you can use your will. If America had the will, it could eradicate the ghettos. They don't have to exist. They exist because we want them to exist.
Yeah.
mhm.
Okay, or white folks want them to exist.
Mm-hmm.
Like when because at one time white people were living in filth and squalor all throughout, like West Virginia and shit
Yep.
like that. The coal
Yep.
miners, I mean, they lived in utter poverty, bro. No
Saw part
running
of that
water.
driving. I saw part of that driving from Greensboro, North Carolina, up to Chicago back in
Yeah.
1995. Saw part of that squalor going through West Virginia. Let me step on out of the way, but GG, I leave you with this: greatest shot ever seen, the NBA has ever seen, May 7th, 1989.
Here's Michael at the foul line. A shot on Elo. Good! The Bulls win!
And
I hear you, man.
therein, I fell in love with Jim Durham as an announcer, and I don't have to explain the rest to you. Let me get on out of here because my wife will be home soon, and I know she's going to be tired.
All right, man. Take care of yourself, man. I'll holler at you, bro.
Thanks for letting me up, Gigi. I appreciate it.
Peace out. Yeah, so but at the end of the day, I think that this guy, Tommy Shelby's going to say, "Look, man, more outreach has limits." And not to say he's against more outreach, but like, what is more outreach really? Like when it comes to cultural reform and it all is predicated upon morality, how do you do it? So either you're gonna be talking to people, lecturing people, giving sermons to people in the pulpit, educational programs in schools, training programs for people who are young adults, counseling programs. What other way is there to do it?
It's not only that. I was at a conference, like I said, it was probably 3, 4 years ago, and the lady was from Philly. She was trying to present what she's trying to do for young boys. And what she got into it's crazy that I'm a social worker with a master's and somebody at the Amazon warehouse can get paid more than me. And I was like, well, I have a health to science degree and an associates and I get paid more than, you know, my job is valued, yours isn't. Um, but she got into the topic of boys. And the thing is, there were lesbian women in and they were from different agencies and whatever. And what they got into, well, what happen if the boys are gay or attracted to trans people? And I'm sitting there like that has nothing to do with just. And I was that was the first time that I noticed that they put different things before the word boy or black boy, or just simply black. And they kept on, inferring that are you basing this just off them being boys and how to improve them? And my thing is like when you look at the numbers, it doesn't matter what these boys identify as. They're black boys and they're all pretty much in a bad situation. And so she was talking about programs that they have to change the boys' behavior. And she was showing pictures through her slides, and it was all ladies educating these boys. And I'm sitting down thinking, like, what's the difference between when they go to school or if they're doing this or when they're at home? It's majority went single women. And she's doing her slideshows. I'm just like unmarried lady. She's about 32. She has a nonprofit. They're all making money. I'm just like I'm looking at it like today, like it is. It's the same thing. They're making money. They get money from the state. They do their little help, and that's the end of that until they get some more money. So I'm just kind of like, it's no saving the majority, just the ones that get decent grades, play sports, uh, has a mom that wants to educate them and spend more than 10 minutes trying to teach them how to write letters and read. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, like the one thing, I was listening to Dr. Neil last night, man, and he was like, man, I've been encouraged to, be mentors and shit like that. And he said, at a certain point, I decided that I'm not going to do this anymore because women were encouraging him to be mentors. We want to get you to mentor. It's like mentoring is not like you can do a 6-month class or a year class and it's done. Like mentoring boys requires connection that lasts for decades, man.
Yeah.
It requires like intensive engagement. You can't like all these like this class based. Now I'm not talking about like class in terms of economic status. I'm talking about like class in terms of training and taking courses and like filling out blanks on pieces of paper or writing essays or taking tests. It's not just an intellectual exchange. Like cultural development takes place and habit formation takes place over years.
Yeah.
Not over the course of, like
6
sitting in a
months.
classroom taking information in, like, like in a rank and file system where you're listening to somebody lecture. That's not changing anybody's behavior. That's like it. And this is one thing, like the educational system in the West gets fucked up all the time. Like they feel like if you know something, what you know ought to impact your behavior.
No,
That's just not the case, man. That shit doesn't work, man.
it's you're right or you're wrong. So it doesn't impact your behavior. It's like even the science classes that I'm in right now, it's either you're right or you're wrong. That's it's it has nothing more to do with anything other than being right or being wrong. If you do the math right, if you do the writing right, it's nothing that you're actually learning. Like where you sit in a group and come up with ideas. It's none of that. It's right or wrong answers, and that's it.
Yeah,
So
but when it comes to life, though, I try to tell people when it comes to living your life, man, like what's the right thing to do or what's the wrong thing to do, man. You can't. There are no exact answers like mathematical equations, bro.
hmm
You know what I'm saying? Like, okay, so man, I just found out my wife is cheating on me, dog. What do I do? I'm like, well, you know, I can tell you what the answer is, but the answer is going to be different for every man that's going through that situation. You know what I'm saying? Or that's a pretty fucked up example, though. So let me use something more simple. Like, let's say, for example, where, you know, it's this chick that, you know, I really like at my job, or not even in my job, but at my school. And, you know, I'm thinking about approaching it like, what do I say? Like, I can't tell you what I would say.
Oh, it's easy.
You know,
Yo,
like,
yo.
because
I
yeah,
keep
I'm
it
just
100.
saying, like, what I say in my approach is going to be different than yours because you're a different person. So my
Yeah.
advice might not even work for you. You know what
I
I'm saying?
used to,
So,
like, before I had my kid, my first 2 years, I just asked girls to read over my paperwork, my homework. And that's how I got most of my ass back then. Like, I want to
yeah,
know your opinion on it.
right,
You know what I'm
right,
saying? That's
yeah.
how I
And then,
got it. You know what I'm saying? But anyway, yeah. Let me roll out because I got to get back to business. But yeah, I want to continue listening. So I'm gonna holler at you.
well, you know, I'm about to sign off, man. It's time for me to go eat,
Alrighty.
man. I'm about to put the chili on the stove that I heated up from last night, man. What that I made from last night, and you know, get down. But yeah, man. So I'll holler at you later. So anyway, man, this has been another installment of me reading from Tommy Shelby's Dark Ghettos. I don't know how many more pages that exist within chapter 3, but let me look at that right now. I might, because I'm trying to get through this, man. I want to get to the shit that I think is most salacious about this. So the end of chapter 3 is what page? Damn, fucking long, boy. This dude, he wrote a book now. God damn, this motherfucker. 114. I know this shit. It's like 30 pages, dude. Okay, so yeah, it ends at 116. Man. Wow. So anyway, I'm only on page, the chapter ends at 116. At the present moment, I'm only on page 97, bro. So we got a ways to go. 117, 116. So I got about 20 pages or so to go, man. But I'm gonna break it into chunks, man. I'm not gonna rush this. But I'm dedicated to reading this entire text, man. So if there's a conversation about the ghetto and people bring up like, well, this is what we need to do, or this, what you doing, and how you doing it, and what the effectiveness of it will be, whatever they propose or whatever, like you'll have background information to basically run, you know, circles around a lot of cats because they don't think about these issues in any systematic way, man. So anyway, man, I'll holler at y'all on the next one, bro. It's gonna be March the 1st tomorrow, so I'll holler at y'all, man, tomorrow, man. Different month, man. Well, I won't be here tomorrow, actually, because you know, I'm gonna be checking out Dr. Johnson shit, but I'll holler at y'all on Thursday, man. Peace out. GreenGorillaChannel.com